Hello. Okay. So, hello everybody. So today we have a talk about body and sensuality. It's animation DNS. We are talking about body and sensuality, as I said, through animation. And my name is Ingrīda Pičukāne. I'm an artist and teacher. So firstly, I introduce our guests shortly, and then we will have a little bit longer introduction. So, here we have Luca Tóth, animation director from Hungary. Maybe you can stand up? Or, I don't know. Or we can greet. Okay. So then we have Kriss Čailds, animator, visual artist and critic from United Kingdom. Oh, sorry. Okay. So unexpected audio effects. And then we have Maija Sfakianaki from United Kingdom and Greece, programmer and curator. And then we have also Dario van Vree, director, screenwriter, teacher, festival director, union organizer and creative producer from Netherlands. Okay, and now we can have some longer introduction, so every participant can tell about themselves a little bit more, and also we will see some films. And yeah, I would like you to introduce yourself and also to tell what is your interest in body, what aspects of the body and sensuality you're interested mostly. So let's start then with Luca.
Hello. Hi. So I'm a Hungarian animation director. I studied in Hungary and in England, and since my studies I've been doing some some work, some independent short films, which were on quite a few festivals. And one of my, I think my main approach to stories are always kind of from the perspective of not fitting into either society or not really finding the fit with a human connection, and it's kind of translated into how I approach body as well. So there's always this sort of feeling that I try to capture, that you kind of like put out a whole of a puzzle, but you as a person, the last piece of a puzzle, and it's just not fitting there. And that's kind of the feeling I'm usually gravitated towards. It's your turn now.
Sorry, maybe we can see your film. Yeah.
Sure. I'm sorry. It's two films of mine. It's like short snippets from them. I'm sorry for being so all over the place.
It's fine. That's because I'm here. Okay, so we then continue with Kriss.
Oh, hello. Hi, I'm Kriss. I'm an animation filmmaker based in Bristol in the UK. And I've made about 3 animated shorts up until this point, and I would say the previous 2 have explored the body in different ways. The one I made in 2021, Library of Paradise, was sort of about the body and illness. It sort of depicts this group of librarians who take care of this strange man who lives in the garden. He's suffering from this sort of invisible, unexplainable pain, and they sort of care for this character and put them through these strange medical procedures. But the film was kind of me sort of exploring my personal experience of chronic pain, and specifically the process of diagnosis of an invisible illness, or an illness that sort of can't be seen, and how that changes your relationship to the body. And then the latest one, Bus Film, also explored the body but in different ways. The first half is about a group of political activists on their way to a protest in London, and on the bus ride there they begin to play these strange kind of mind games with each other, which sort of becomes sort of weirdly sexual in nature. And then the second half is a character that keeps trying to be run over by a bus, sort of like in this sort of strange self-destructive impulse. So yeah, and I mean it was less personal in a way, but it was also exploring the body as well. So yeah, I think I have trailers for both of those films. I think this one here is Library of Paradise. So I get to play this one.
In the morning times, before we tended to the patient, were big breakfasts. Crumpets with butter, orange juice from the fruit. We all kissed, collectively, quickly, and without comment.
Yeah, and I think that's a trailer for Bus Film as well.
Okay, so we continue with Maija. Thank you for film.
Hello. 1, 2, 1, 2. Hello. Hi. Well, yes, my name is Maija Sfakianaki. I work as a programmer and a curator between the UK and Greece. For me, it's really important to be here among such fantastic animators and artists, some of them that I was familiar with from the past, but some also new artists I'm meeting here. So yeah, I'd like to thank the festival for having me as their guest as well. And for me, this topic is very particularly important, and I talk a lot about sensuality and intimacy in the programs that I'm putting forward. And from my perspective, as a young woman quite sexually liberated, I feel it's really important to discuss our kind of personal experiences and be able to share them without shame. So I'm really happy to be here and talk about those issues with you today.
Thank you. Then Dario.
Hi, my name is Dario van Vree. I'm an animation director mostly. I mean, apart from all the other titles, I do or have done those things as well, but I'm mainly director. Yeah, we're going to see, I think, a complete little short of mine I did a few years ago. It was screened in cinemas in the Netherlands as a precursory film to blockbuster films. So this was a special funding program by the Dutch Film Fund. But the idea of the film is also that it appeals to a large audience. So the way it is designed and how the story is told is for like a general audience. But the content matter is, the design choices were also made deliberately so that the content matter wouldn't be too intimidating. But you'll see what I mean when you see the film. Can we see Tabuk?
Gift wrapped?
So what you're looking at now, that's just a little snippet from a film that's in production right now at our studio that also deals with love and the different shape and form of it. Directed by Aisha Madhu, and it's supposed to come out this year.
Okay, thank you for introduction. And we saw really different aspects of approach to the body. And I also will tell a little bit about myself. I'm mostly artist, but also teacher in Riga Art and Media School, and I teach animation and comics. And the reason why I'm here is also because I'm interested in body, especially female body, and I'm talking a lot in my art about different experiences. I have done exhibition about menstrual pain. Maybe that's also a little bit similar to what Kriss talked about. I did huge comics talking about menstrual pain, and then I have done also a piece about female masturbating, and I also have done a piece about aging. So yeah, usually I'm an artist, and as I said, I'm a teacher, but to be moderator is kind of new emploi for me, so be kind. But yes, as I'm interested in different topics that are connected with body, I'm sure this will be very interesting and fruitful conversation. So, let's start with the first question. So, animation is really like flexible and interesting media where you can talk really differently, and in a way, so it's versatile and you can often say so much more than in live action films. So, what do you think? Is animation more suitable for talking about body issues, in your opinion? Is it like easier to talk about your body? So maybe we can start. Luca?
I think there is a difference in the sense that when you have a live action film and you have actors, they have their own relationship with their body, and they have their own boundaries and such. And when you draw a body, sometimes for one reason, because you create it, it's very intimate. You put maybe your shame in it, or maybe your fears in it, or maybe those parts that you are not kind when you are thinking about yourself. But by putting it in a drawing, it kind of it's not you, but it also, you are not using someone else's body, so you are more free to portray that. What I'm trying to say is that with an actor, it's so much harder to have all those boundaries between you and the actor, but in the animation process, you can really dive into some intimate picture.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you're saying, that you have a lot more space to put all of yourself in it, and you don't need to direct anyone else, which is really hard to do on a live action film. I'm kind of experimenting in photography at the moment with actually picturing intimate moments between myself and other people, and even this is really, really difficult to do, because of course, like, there is always a bit of directing in it, while animation gives you far more freedom. And I feel like people are also, like, the audiences are much more open to different and more challenging images in animation, while we tend to, when we see real bodies, when we see what is, happening in a live action film, we tend to be a little bit more shocked, I think, with those images.
Hello. Yeah, animation as a medium has already immediately distanced to reality. So audience already know this is not real. What I'm looking at. That's how that's the deal you make as a maker with the audience, and we all accept that. And because there is this distance to reality, you can show much more provocative images, and also not just things that have to do with sensuality or the body, but also regarding to themes, topics, like violence, for example. And you can talk about these heavy topics in a more sort of playful and light way as well, because you have a lot more leeway to move around without the audience dismissing it as being too visceral for them to deal with.
I also, feel like when we kind of lose that anthropomorphic shape, and we kind of might not feel that we are identifying with another human being. So if we see a really violent image happening to another human, we tend to take it a little bit more. So this is why I think animation is super powerful, and it can create very evocative images. Sadly, people don't realize that they're influenced by it.
Yes, but you also have the ability to actually exaggerate things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as an animator, you're always taking the essence out. I mean, you can't take everything because you don't get anything for free. Like if you're filming a real actor, there's all these tiny little muscle movements in the face that you can't do that in animation. It's really, maybe not yet. So that's the uncanny valley, but...
Maybe you want to ask?
Yeah. I think the point of exaggeration is a really interesting one as well, and also the animated body or the animated character not being tied down to any physical constraint that the human body is, to the point where a character can, transform into a completely different person or transform into an inanimate object. So it sort of does away with any sort of boundary or constraint that's placed on this animated performance. But I also think animation's well suited to subjects of the body, sensuality, sexuality, because of also the process of making animation can be very private. It has the possibility of, if you wanted it to, maybe not even involving another soul. And it's possible to make a film about something, not have to actually verbally communicate it at any part of the process, potentially to another person, which maybe that results in films that explore things which are like, maybe as soon as it's said, it could shatter. It's like a really sort of fragile
One idea from this, in animation you can make film sometimes by yourself, but also, and it can be very intimate, and therefore the process can be very intimate. And also, when you make a live action film, it's more often than not, it has a hierarchy in the process. You have definitely a director and a DOP and everyone. And in animation, very often it's more fluent between the roles, and there is not that strong of a hierarchy. And I think that helps in the way of how you portray intimacy and how you get close to a body, basically.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I also started to think about that, as I'm recently mostly working in drawing, and when I did my drawings, for example, about pain, it's interesting that from one side it's a possibility through the character to be more distant and somehow to watch yourself, but from the other side, it's more also I can show my feelings and how my body moves, it's like in a way also more intimate and more precise, I should say, than acting film could be. And that's for me really interesting how it works with animation as well. So also, as Kriss mentioned about this intimacy, authorship, and that author is very close to film, and what Luca said about this hierarchy, that you don't have this hierarchy and you have this straightforward approach to this material that you are making. That's probably mostly about author films that one author is doing. Sometimes it's a group and it's a little bit different. But then maybe we can move forward and talk more about this sensuality part and about more precise about intimacy. I wanted to ask you, what is intimacy for you in broader sense, and maybe if we speak about animation, and also probably we can talk about taboos. Do you still have taboos? Do you think that audience have taboos, and how you deal with it? Yeah. Who wants to be first? Okay, Maija.
Intimacy, what is intimacy? For me, and I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, talking about intimacy actually a bit outside of animation, because I feel like intimacy involves two people. And as you said, yes, animation is quite a lonely process. So I feel like that's why I feel like sometimes in documentary forms or photography, you can see, you can capture the vibe between the two people. You can capture the energy, the way they talk, what they share between them. I feel like intimacy is an act of two for me. Yeah, I feel like this is interesting when you talk about animation, because in animation, if you want to portray a subject, you have to actually talk about kind of both of them. You talk about two people, but you talk as a singular person. So that's more of a question to you as artists. How do you deal with this? So if you want to show intimacy between two, but you're seeing it from one side, how do you portray it?
Oh, I have
Turned into a question.
I have an answer for that. I think intimacy is when you are like so purely vulnerable that you feel like you're gonna die, or it's like so bad. It's like you show this most shameful, most hurtful part of you, and you believe that the other person will get you, or will not judge you for it, or just have you, or just listen to you or whatever. And I think in terms of animation, it's very often that you put something out that is like so intimate and so true to yourself, and you kind of getting ready for this rush of shame, basically, and you sit in front of right now it's in front of the audience, but usually with an audience, and you hear their reaction, and the intimacy happens between you and the audience when you like really seeing your most vulnerable sides on a huge screen. Sometimes I feel like it's watching your own movie with an audience is a bit like Limbo, because it's so insanely scary, but at the same time sometimes so enriching.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point about the after the film is made, when it's being seen, is when that kind of connection happens. And as well as being an audience member and watching either a film that's about intimacy or a film that feels intimate, I think is also a really interesting connection, where I think that's a real success on the part of the animator, where it's like the film feels personal in a way where it doesn't feel like it's being projected out to a mass audience. It's sort of to like just you. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting as well. I feel like animation is well suited to intimacy, because I feel like lots of those emotions feel like they take you outside of yourself, or take you outside of the world as it is, to some kind of surreal place. And in a way, or some kind of, I mean, if you're sort of seeing the intimacy of two real actors, perhaps you're sort of seeing an outside experience, and then animation can actually depict an emotion or an experience itself. It might not even have to depict the characters themselves being intimate, but the kind of emotion of intimacy, so it can kind of almost like enter the emotion itself, maybe.
Okay, Dario, do you want to add something?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting. Just the film that was shown that I made a few years ago, that was actually a team effort, but it's an autobiographical story. I mean, it's 100% autobiographical. It actually kind of happened that way.
You're the...
Yeah, I'm what the protagonist is experienced. I experienced something similar, but working in a team with people. It was more of a hierarchical effort, so it was a challenge to keep it close and to keep it intimate, let's say. But you see also in the design choices, it's a very slick and sort of polished film. In that sense, it kind of lacks intimacy, I would say. Where, for example, I think when we're watching your films, you really get an eye into the process, especially with because your films are very sort of rough, and you really feel and see your hand there. And that's also a kind of intimacy, I think, that we can experience when we're with the audience, between the maker and the audience. It's like it's not just about the effect of how you feel, but actually showing the process of making. And that's a daring thing to do, I think. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I really like this idea about that the intimacy is happening also between your film and audience. I never thought about like that because, maybe in animation it's not so obvious. Like when I did actually my piece about menstruation, I also did it like open space where I painted and audience can come and can talk with me and discuss. So I met my audience. So and I think it's also interesting, what Dario told about this form, how form also can be intimate, like less intimate and more, as you said, sleek. And also probably, this more like hand effort that you can see really, this physical, that I actually really love in animation that you can see, and also in painting and drawing, that you have this hand movement that is magic, that you can see something that is undescribable. So that leads us to another question about there is such a term like visceral. Have you heard it? So visceral is quite a new term for me as well, but this means that something is more intuitive. So I wanted to ask you, and thank you, Luca, for this question. This question is about, is it like animation more visceral, or is it possible to speak there more intuitive? We actually already spoke about a little bit, but is it like more kind of intuitive media if we compare with film? What do you say?
Just on a note of the word visceral, maybe I have the Hungarian translation of it, but it kind of means, what I think it means is that you feel something in your body. So seeing something or seeing a movie or hearing the sound of it and all that, and you don't have a conscious reaction to it, you have a bodily reaction to it. So your body reacts to the body of the screen. And I think animation is really good material for that. For example, the little snippet that I showed, it kind of is a bit like an ASMR. I was like, they're like whispering. And all these very intimate sounds and very subtle yet but very close feels. And why I was suggesting this question was that because in animation you can really make someone's skin crawl, and I think it's really a specialty of animation. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with this, because you actually have so much freedom, and you can be minimalist in how you show things. I watched this trilogy of animation short films by a Japanese artist, I hope I said this right, Yoshiro Mizukiri. She had a film in Cannes as well a few years back. So she makes animations about the senses. So all of that she talks about, it's super simple lines, very minimalist, very connected and inspired by sounds, and you actually can feel it so close that it almost, it feels super real. But at the same time, other artists are trying more expressionistic and more experimental methods, also experiment with documentary. For example, Laura Harrison is an artist, is a British, I don't know if you know her, Kriss. She does really crazy, really neon lit and really maximalist animation, and she uses a lot of a lot of actors' voiceovers, so she uses far more dialogue and creates more intricate narratives, but it also, her work feels really super intimate and close. So I think that yes, like animation is such a broad range of possibilities of how to approach the subject of sensuality of the body and of intimacy. So you're lucky, guys. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I mean, both of those filmmakers that you brought up, like that trilogy, and is Anxious Body one of their films?
Anxious Body, yes. That's
yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it really gives you, what you were talking about this kind of skin crawling, you can feel it on your skin. And I think, like, even though I don't work in stop motion now, I feel a lot of those, like, experiences where you can feel the texture on screen has come from stop motion animation, especially when it's kind of like grimy or like Key Brothers, Jan Spagmeier. I mean, again, with the intimacy between the film and the audience, it's like you're close to the image, and it's almost like there's less escape, and it's almost like the image is kind of like electric, or the image is bumpy. It's like it's not a flat plane anymore. But now just working on paper. So.
You can also be you can be super provocative. Like you never see something like, because you mentioned as well in a chat we had before about Wong Ping and how his work is so challenging, and you could never see like scenes like this in a live action film. It would be completely censored. You couldn't just go and see like I don't know. It would be considered porn, and I think that this is why animation has this very, very strong advantage of showing those images that people think that they're a little bit detached from it because it's not human bodies making them. But the point is there, and your message you can pass.
Yeah, what you said also earlier about your film, that there's a lot of room for sound design in animation, because the whole image is already constructed. If you would put a soundtrack like yours under live action footage, it would feel very contrived and they wouldn't merge. And now it's a complete experience, because with animation you can make very strong sound design choices and get very, very close up with the audience. And that's, we should never forget, like 50% of a film is sound. So, and I think that's a really good example that you showed of what that can do. I think another aspect of like an ability that we have as humans is to envision movement, motion. Like in the same way that when you close your eyes, you can see visuals. You can think of a house, and then you see a house. You can do the same thing with motion. It's called motor imagery. And I think it's something that we are not as much aware of, that we have this ability, but we do. And especially animators are really trained in that, because they can sit behind a desk and come up with a whole performance in their head and then put it on paper that feels alive. But we are able to do this, and we can also mirror motion that we see that's presented to us, and we can feel the movement, let's say. If you start paying attention to that, it's really really interesting to discover. I don't know if it's possible, but I requested to show a little bit of a film. We can't do it? Okay, all right, too bad. Too bad. The film is about, it's an animated film, of course. It's about a man, it's sort of a documentary. The subject of the film is a man who lost all ability to move, so he's completely paralyzed in a wheelchair. This is an actual story. So he gradually lost the ability to move, and he says that even though he can't move his body, his experience of movement is more free than ever before, because in his mind he can not just make any movement he can come up with. He's also not bound by the physical limitations of the body. So he can imagine himself to be enormous or tiny or have 1 kilometer long arms, and he can really vividly experience that. and this is depicted in the film. And I think that that's one of the most discerning qualities of animation regards to other art forms, at least in my opinion and my experience as well. That was my little statement here.
So yes, yeah, it's very interesting. I started to think about this texture thing and ASMR, that is like visual texture and audio texture and some things that you can get. And yeah, it seems that the animation is giving us more like fully experience. That because we are like probably like filmed film is more like this documentation, although of course it's also discussable, but yeah, it's about also this motion and movement and about imagination, because we are also we are living all the time actually with our imagination, and all the time we have this reality plus something that is going on in our head, our body, and probably it seems that animation is really good media to talk about it. And I also wanted to ask you more about this representation in the animation, and about, for example, speaking about nude body. Is it also like easier to show nude bodies and through animation than in films? And is it more widespread, and why? And is it more like is it like easier for you to speak through nude body in animation? So, Kriss, maybe.
I guess it's an interesting one. I mean, there are some like bits of nudity in my film, and I mean it's odd because it's like I would say in the films they're almost used as moments of comedy or moments of provocation, which is interesting because in a way, in the ideal world, it wouldn't be a provocation to show a nude body. So, I mean, in that way, I'm using those images to sort of maybe not shock the audience, but suddenly take them out of themselves or elevate it, especially because I use quite kind of cartoon, illustrative aesthetics. It creates sort of a kind of unusual space where you've got the aesthetics of cartoons, but then you're introducing kind of explicit elements to it. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess it's interesting because, of course, it's easier to show nudity because it's a fictional creation, it's a drawing, it's a depiction. But I suppose that does also open up these other discussions around it where it's, how much of a responsibility do you still have for this fictional creation, because it's still a depiction and the audience are still relating to this depiction. So I think lots of, like early Hollywood cartoons that have kind of stereotyped visions of women, minorities. It seems to assume that because this is a drawing, it's kind of fictional and you're removing yourself from responsibilities of how you are depicting these characters. But
I've never directed live action, but I would imagine if I would have a nude person in front of me and I would have a camera, my thoughts were like all over the place. I would think about the shot, I would think about the light, and most definitely I think the first thing, the top of the list would be thinking about this other person, how they are feeling, can I get closer? Do I bother him or her? So I would have a lot of questions about us being in the process, and I would have a lot of fear and doubt about it. I would try to get their boundaries. I would try to get a mutual agreement about what we are doing there. In animation, when you are alone with your imagination and you are putting something down on the paper, it's a different approach. So in that sense, I think it's easier to show naked bodies.
And I also feel like even now, we really seldomly see in live action films like older people or people with disabilities or people that they don't have this idealized body and very much sexualized as well for women. It's very, very upsetting, even now, even in independent films, that if you just notice how a female body is always needs to be beautiful for her to be an object of desire and love, and it's something that I feel like we're really lacking in the representation of the body. That's not seeing it as sexualized, but seeing it actually as a very important aspect of oneself. And it doesn't matter how it looks really, but what it represents for its person.
Yeah. On the other hand, it's also possible to create a character that's completely void of any kind of physical traits, and for still to identify with them as either male or female, in animation particularly, of course. So in that sense, that there's a lot possible there. The film I'm making right now, it's also a female protagonist, and I wouldn't make any kind of like aesthetic judgment on her looks, let's say. I mean, she's not particularly good looking or particularly bad looking, or bad looking or different than like it's almost a stick figure, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I feel like in animation, then yes, probably much more so than on a live action film, that the camera has kind of adopted a certain gaze of looking on its female subjects. I believe, and I kind of identify it when I see it, so I feel like I have to call it out, that it does happen, like that how the camera treats and sees a woman is different than how a camera sees a man. That's all I have to say. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Yeah, I can add actually my next question was, and it's also nicely fits to this that you already started to speak about, this gender and representation, because yes, for me also I see a lot of objectification of female body, and also if we speak about Latvian animation, I see a lot of objectification. It's kind of weird for me also, because weird in the sense that, as we talked, like animation, it's such a beautiful media to very imaginative, and you have a lot of possibilities, but from other side I still can see how there is this male gaze, and how it's like, for me, like what I'm trying also to do in my art, to speak about my experience, like female experience, how I feel with my body, what's going on, and how I feel, not like from my personal perspective. So yes, unfortunately, I still can see, also as Maija said, I can see a lot of this male films that are have this one-sided approach, and it's nice that Dario is making films that has another approach. But yeah, I wanted to ask also for you, how do you feel? Do you feel that as a woman or man or other gender, how do you feel? Do you have this different approaches, or can you see in other films as different approaches depending on the gender of the author? And yeah, speaking about representation of male and female, and what Maija also said also resonates to me, that very often I can see that male is represented as a character and female mostly just as beautiful object. So yeah, and whereas character has depth and different traits, as female character has just this beauty and body, mostly body in one kind of way, and just quite shallow, I should say. Yeah. So okay, what do you think about? Gender, is it important for you? Do you feel that you do this like male or female, or yeah?
I feel like if we go back to the ancient Greek art, that you also see the male figure being, like very masculine and idealized, and but not sexualized whatsoever. While the female figure, it took until like 400 BC to actually be seen, the first nude, what was portrayed then in a sculpture, and you'd say, and still it would be kind of covered, So there is this duality on like how we treat the female body, because you have this version of the female being idealized and kind of like her sexual parts hidden, and there's the other part which is seeing it as a sexualized object. But
There's this whore and saint.
yes, exactly.
And the two roles.
So for me, this is very prominent, and it's always been prominent in art, and it's been only like maybe now, like the last two decades, that things are actually kind of shifting, with queer communities coming up in the foreground, and gender being far more fluid and becoming far more fluid. That I feel like it's now that change is made, and I feel like animation is actually helping us quite a lot. But we have a long way to go, I still believe.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up how it's like that lineage of sexualization sort of goes back through the history of art, and I'm interested in in animation how sort of sexualized depictions, problematic depictions are also recreated in a way. I think it's interesting that there's been a re-evaluation of the animator's survival kit, this kind of foundational textbook which sort of goes through various techniques of 2D traditional hand-drawn animation, but it's kind of now, it's kind of being reassessed in terms of, I mean, a lot of the animation that techniques in the book are to do with walks, how to animate a character walking, and particularly the parts of the book where it's sort of like these very exaggerated sexualized depictions of women, how they walk. There's also a part where Richard Williams is talking about like how to like how a queer person walks in like this exaggerated way, and so it's like, yeah, there's been this whole backlash, but I find it really interesting because it's like the people who are going against it sort of argue that, even though the book claims to be just the textbook of techniques, it's also tied in with these society's expectations or depictions, and that if you sort of reject the techniques and sort of embrace more experimental approaches, that's also rejecting society's idea of what a body should be or could be, and moving into a space where it becomes more kind of fluid and free. And yeah, animators like Anna Firth have been really interested in talking about that, because she does these amazing looping animations, but she sort of speaks about how sort of like breaking the rules of anatomy in animation becomes a kind of strangely liberating thing in terms of gender possibly as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting discussion, I think, as well. I mean, exaggerations, sometimes turn into stereotypes, and this is something that we are kind of still processing, this whole sort of realization that we have to take responsibility for this. I mean, you can't ever take entirely all the responsibility for your work and its effects, but it's something to be definitely aware of. I mean, Richard Williams, he was also one of the directors on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, that features, I think, the quintessential animated, sexy woman scene, the Jessica Rabbit dancing scene, which I'd say it's a great scene. It's very well done, but it's also an extreme exaggeration of female sexuality. But for a lot of people, it's really, they really like it still. But she's like fetishized. It's really, there's a large group of people who, for who she's like this icon. What can we do with that? Is that something we have to reevaluate? I mean, it's a difficult topic, I'd say. But I'm not saying like we should do either or other. But it exists. So, what do you think about that?
I think it's really interesting, if we talk about sexuality, what is this? Because I also noticed that it's like interesting that there are queer movies where if we talk about, for example, male body, it's usually sexualized in queer movies, and in heterosexual movies. So weird. Sounds, and also I have friends, that girls who are watching anime that are about boy romance. There are two boys, and it's actually for their eye look very sexual because it's very rare when we can see in mainstream, and of course it's also changing and shifting now, and I can see it really well in my students. So they are talking more about body, male and female and queer body as well, and I wonder how it should go, because somehow it's in my opinion it's a bit like one-sided, that just like this female body is objectified and sexualized and male body almost never, but it's interesting how for me it would be like the process that society will become more healthy, because I can see some kind of asymmetry in this process. Can I add
Sure. I feel like generally the body is a concept that really we struggle with a lot, either as female or as males, and there is certain like expectations that come with it. So I feel like the animation that you just talked about, which is a documentary. What is the name of it?
Sorry, which one?
That you said
Orgasticulanismus is the name.
For me, it is very interesting because we see like thousands of bodies and moving all the time, and kind of like very rapidly, and turning into losing slowly their anthropomorphic shape and taking different shapes, and losing, like merging with each other. And I found this scene like really, really super liberating. The fact that the body kind of stops existing. And I feel like animation and what you do with your work as well, like one of your characters is not human whatsoever. It's a part of the body, you know. With animation you can play with this, you can be creative, and you can challenge what we are meant to fit in, you know. So
that's also, I had this one question about this possibility, like to have this neutral body, and I agree that in Luca's films it's interesting. I also watched, and at one moment I tried to also, as I'm raised up really like in binary society, super binary, that is still in Latvia, it's very binary, like women are raised in one way and men are raised in another way, a little bit like two different worlds. Of course, again, it's changing. And we have also non-binary kids in school openly, and it's nice. And in Lucas, I just realized that my brain is trying to to understand, is it male or female? And I couldn't. Got this little I think it's interesting because this animation is such a nice and fluid in a way media that that's, I think it's an interesting question. Is it like, can it be like future media because it's so fluid, and to work with this body, and maybe it can achieve this kind of talk about neutral body, and talk about also femininity and masculinity, and also that's talk about masculinity not in a toxic way but also in a vulnerable way. That that's, I think it's also very important that it's kind of different talks, that it's not I haven't seen actually any like Latvian movie about like male body that is in this vulnerable way. I think Kriss probably has this in his animations. What do you think?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I mean the library film, because it was about the process of being diagnosed with this illness. It was kind of a way of sort of discussing stuff through a film which I hadn't verbally discussed with lots of people before. But I mean, it's interesting. I guess I do sort of have male nudity and male bodies, but I don't know whether any other sort of nudity I'd want to show in the films. I don't know, but maybe not. In some of the films I try and make the characters more anthropomorphic, but then people watch them and say that they still just look like men, so I'm probably not trying hard.
I wanted to ask also to Luca, is it like, do you consciously work with this like gender element and male or female body, or it's like just talking about how it's the process?
It's very. I had a film called Suburbia that was mainly about that. There was this. It's about a fictional society that has these roles and how it shifts in a moment. So I do have this, and I of course have. I'm a lady. I've been raised that my body grew before my brain decided that I was an adult. And when you're have a child brain but you look like a lady, you start to have this weird dissonance of people look at you as if you were this very sexual person, and yet you are in such a transformation that it's just so weird. And I think it's getting harder and harder for both women and men. I think it's there are some extreme expectations people face with, and of course it's part of my thing. But it's not always necessarily something that I push. Sometimes I have it on my agenda, but sometimes it's just something that is silently, quietly back of my mind, influences my approaches.
Yeah, I think this is this intuitive part in animation that you can show in animation. That I wanted to ask also, Maija is curating and also Dario is. So maybe you can comment. Do you feel like changes, something shifting, if we speak about this approach to the body and about this male gaze or rising female gaze probably, and queer?
Absolutely, it's happening, and I told you already earlier, I'm also teaching. I started teaching 10 years ago, and most students were animation students were male. Now I have a class of 55 students, and 3 of them are male. So regardless of a choice, we're going to see a lot more female animators in films made by women, and also gender neutral or by non-binary people as well. So just by the fact that they are animating, there's going to be more representation. But I already see also, in recent films, for example, this film that came out, it's called Naiola. It's the main characters are female, but the director is a male. It's a Portuguese director. He's making a film about 3 Angolan women. And you may know Angola was a colony of Portugal, and they had War of Independence in the 70s. So when they asked him, how he worked for 10 years on this film, and he said, if I would be asked to do this film now, I wouldn't do it anymore, because times has changed. 10 years ago, it was still something that was acceptable, but right now I think he understands why am I as a Portuguese man directing this film? That's not that's not how it should be. So, but in that way, I do think that there is definitely changes happening. So.
Yes, I agree with everything that you say, but I also kind of have to point out here that maybe the animation, like the indie films, the festival world kind of changing and shifts towards more and more equality, but I'm not entirely sure this is happening across popular culture as well. And I feel very much like shows like Love Island in the UK, or because you're laughing, but there's so many people that that short animated film how many people are going to watch it and how many people are watching Love Island. And that is the problem. Where is the change happening? Because it's great it's happening between us and we can talk about it. But then outside, how is the popular media, when are they going to be influenced to be more diverse and to push more equality?
Maybe it's not gonna be a popular opinion, but I think the mainstream films are shifting, and I am wholeheartedly a feminist woman, but I feel like there are a lot of mainstream feminism in movies that is just so fake these days.
No.
And a lot of female characters that don't have faults, they don't have struggles, they're just super empowered, like in Star Wars and whatever. And for having a main character, you need them to be faulty, you need them to stumble, you need them to get on a journey and at the end becoming a better person. And I feel like there is a lot of very like shallow way of trying to mimic empowerment female stories in mainstream movies.
Yeah, but that's wrong again.
Yeah.
You see. So this is not exactly real change. This is kind of touching the surface just to be like, oh yeah, fine, we've dealt with it. Well, you don't really deal with it. But it's always going to take a very long time. I don't feel like, I mean, how long is cinema exists as a medium? So we still have a long way to go, but definitely we are better trying. Trying. A bit clumsily, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree with it. That and I think it's in very many films. I had really nice discussion. I was invited in Sweden to talk about feminist comics. It was such a great event. Oh my God, when it will be in Latvia that we will have feminist comics event. It's like after 100 or 200 years probably. So, but yeah, I think there were really nice talk about this fake feminism that it's like that's not really feminism, that you just put some woman in this main role, but actually that, as you said also, that it's not talking in depth. And again, it's about idealization, and it's like, again, women should be perfect. And I think for me, it's very important to speak about this, that character of woman is also the same complex as male characters, that it's character, it's not some kind of vision or fantasy, or again, some perfect woman just with wider shoulders or something. Yeah, and last question actually, maybe it would be nice to end with this future question, but then I also have questions that I am particularly interested in, and I wanted to ask this question because I realized that we live in Europe. I asked Kriss, is UK in Europe? I'm not sure, but okay, joking, but it's not in Europe. But the thing is that I really see the difference between Eastern Europe and Western Europe still, and I wanted to ask a little bit about this representation of body connected with the country you are coming from. Is it like, because I studied in Estonia, and I realized that in Estonia there are much more films that are talking about sensuality and sexuality, as in Latvia we don't have so much. That's very interesting because we have the same Soviet past, and in Soviet Union it was kind of, body was very restricted, and it was, there wasn't any classes about sexuality and any talks about sexuality, and so it was a little bit like taboo topic. So I think it impacted us, but for me it's very interesting how different is this. We are neighbors, but still we have very different approaches. So can you comment a little bit about your country and your experience, how it's this representation of body? If you compare, can you see the difference between Eastern Europe and Western Europe? Let's say Western Europe, Eastern. We are not Oh, okay. It's like I have this. It's not. in the school, usually I put on my alarm clock so I can see that we are going out of the time, running out of the time. So yeah, it's an alarm clock, but we still have 5 minutes, so maybe we can talk a bit about this topic.
Okay, so I work between Greece and London, and these are like two completely different worlds entirely. It's insane. But I'm just gonna talk very briefly about this experience I had in a animation international film festival, Animācijas. It happens in an island in Greece, but it's quite well known. Gets a lot of funding. People travel from all over the world. So the international competition is fantastic. And I would go and watch the national competition, and just like seriously, there was not a single good film there. And sorry, but it was absolutely really, really, really bad, the level of films. And also there were no females. Like there were like 3 slots, and there was 1 female animator throughout the national competition. And I don't believe that was intentional from the festival. I believe there is not a lot of female animators in Greece at the moment. But you have a different experience, no?
So
Well,
yes, it's
no.
different. It's very country specific, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And then, but also what my previous comment, I think it's also something that's coming. I mean, so like the majority of sort of established, like older animation directors are definitely male, also in the Netherlands, which is like a handful of people, and they're all male. But the next generation that's coming are mostly female. I think it also might have to do with different ways of funding and, you know, which people are on the board of the funds and decide these things. It's quite arbitrary, in my experience, as far as I've seen and heard, unfortunately. But yeah, I do know Estonian animation, yes, and I can understand that you mirror. We have a similar situation where Belgium, especially the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, has a very developed, long-standing animation industry, and they do both author films and bigger productions, and series and feature films. And in the Netherlands, it's just impossible to make a animated series that's not for children, because there is no funding system for it. So it's only author shorts and feature films, and there's a huge gap, and this is a problem for the development of the industry as a whole. That doesn't have anything to do with body, but it's different in different countries, and we all have different problems, I'd say. How is that in the UK? Is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, the UK, I guess, just hates nudity on screen in real life. So, yeah, I mean, I think it probably makes it more difficult. Yeah, I mean, in like UK cinema generally, I don't think there's a lot of nudity. There might be films about body, but I don't think it would. Yeah, and I think it probably makes it more difficult because then maybe when there is a film that does deal explicitly in sensuality in the body, it's seen as a clear provocation, the same way like that extreme violence would be. It's like this extreme film, or when that might not even be the case, just the content is maybe more out there. But no, I'm not sure. I think definitely in the world of maybe independent animation, I think there's lots of films coming out now which are dealing with sensuality in very unconventional ways, like Sophie Coco Gates' work, like Slug Life, which is such like an unconventional approach to the subject, where there's a character who's like creating a husband and like a insane contraption, and then he's a slug, and so it's definitely very much detached from like what you would call reality, but I think it's still like a very valid way of exploring it. It's kind of like a new surrealism almost, which is kind of at odds with what's going on in UK features, which is kind of a return to ultra realist, which is interesting that there's that sort of dynamic going on. But
I actually feel like the funding. So funding in the UK is completely differently distributed, and they are really looking in the short film world to push a lot of like social realist like concerned films. So I feel like if you're a bit more of an experimental filmmaker, you do find it quite hard to get funding in the UK, because they've taken a direction now, which is serious dramas. And I see this because I watch all of the British shorts, all of them, and they're all fucking same. So like, but from 200 films that I watched like every year for the BIFAs, I haven't seen anything around sensuality or the body in the UK, nothing. So that's problematic.
Yeah, okay, Luca, maybe you sorry.
I don't know if different countries have different way of portraying the body, but I have noticed that the Finnish have a lot of sauna films with a lot of naked people in it. That's all I can add to this question.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it was indeed very interesting talk. I guess, yeah. So now we have also some time for audience questions. So feel free to comment or to ask something, and raise your hand if you have something to say. Usually in Latvia we don't have questions, but we can try always.
Well, I have one.
Okay, do you need the mic?
No, thanks. Oh, okay. Then I need the mic.
Yeah, maybe we are recording.
Alright, well, we need the mic, but we need the mic. Okay, I already forgot the question.
Okay, right, question. Yeah, about this lack of feminine characters, especially the protagonists you mentioned during the conversation. Is there a way like out of it? Because we had, there was this question asked maybe throughout the last bit of conversation, because it really stuck in my head. Maybe you came up with something, like a solution to this problem, to, have more, like different perspective. Because we have a lot of directors who are men. I guess there are more men directors than women. And also the cameramen. Cameramen already the profession itself. So yeah, what do you think about that? Is there a way out of it?
For me, it's very easy. That's what I'm doing. I'm talking about my perspective and my just experience as female. And for me, I think it's really nice point about camera guys, because one female director told me that she made a feature film and then she got male DOP cameraman, and she said that it was horrible. He was so objectifying. So the way how he was filming, because I think it is already in composition in a way how you perceive things, and of course it's also connected with who is your teacher, how he is teaching you. She's like, okay, he, and also cameraman, already we have cameramen, and as I'm teaching in this Riga Art and Media School, I have taught these classes that are for cameramen and women, as I'm always saying. There are 80% of men, and I think it's totally connected with this stereotype that is still working, that there are a lot of very heavy stuff that you have to keep, and so there are girls just are afraid to go there, but yeah, so maybe guests have...
I feel like a solution to this is, again, coming back to who is actually controlling funding, because film is very, very difficult to make. If you're a visual artist, you can buy some cameras, you can buy some paint, and you can express yourself. If you want to make a film, it's not that easy. And we're not just talking about animation, generally, especially live action is really tough. So if you want to get money, and you want to speak about, let's say, sexuality, you probably won't get this funding. So it really comes back to how we educate the new generations. And as we see that this is a conversation we have now, which is perfect. So maybe in in 20 years there will be more people, more conversations like this, and the key figures would have changed from being like this cis white male normally, especially in kind of like my country's Greece way, it's a lot like this. And maybe if this will change for me, then there will be more opportunity for more kind of alternative voices to be brought in the foreground. So it's a bit of like a circle.
Okay. Yeah. I think it's not. A solution is hard to formulate, but I do think it has to do with broader societal circumstances. The Netherlands in that sense is really quite liberal. I think if I look at my surroundings and also the films I've worked on, I mean the film that I'm making now, I'm co-rated with a woman, a female author and art director, key animator, half the animation team, actually mostly women. So for me it's more like about working with good people, and if we can work together, men, women, or whatever non-binary, that's really what it's about, to build good cooperations, I think, collaborations, and through that it will sort of, the solution will occur, I think, unless there is really a very sort of strict idea of hierarchy or prejudice about gender, certain gender artists. Like, women can't do camera, for example. Why not? It's like, okay, it's heavy because it's heavy. Yeah.
The difference between the Netherlands and Greece is massive. I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's great. It's crazy. It's like we're like 40 years back. I don't know, but it still exists. And of course, the Netherlands is a very progressive country, as the UK as well, actually. So, but yeah, it's kind of. But you say that a lot of people that you work with are coming from different backgrounds, and I feel like this is exactly where we need to be, but we are not. That's all.
From the perspective of teaching, I start with an example. In Hungary, where I studied first, we have an art school where you study animation, and you have a film school where you study filmmaking. And if you want to be a director, film director, you have to apply to be on the director course. Or if you want to be a DOP, you have to apply for the DOP course. But for animation, everyone applies for the animation course. And after a while, you start to figure out if you want to be a director, if you want to be a background artist, if you are more into comics, if you are more into that one. So everyone starts in the same pot. But in the filmmaking process, at age 18, you have to know if I want to be the boss or the boss number 2 or the producer. So it's already a hierarchic system in the school, and as I was like 18-year-old, I would be super scared to go there as a director. But in animation, you can just go without this hierarchic system and slowly boil to the point that you realize. I mean, I'm talking about cooking, but slowly getting to the realization that you are strong enough to direct. You trust your ability. So I think that might be one of the approaches that might help. That you don't necessarily have to go straight forward to the boss job at first, because in Hungary there are way more Hungarian animator women than in the live action field, which is very, very guy dominated.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of expanding on what Maija was talking about with the money, funding, mixed money and funding put together, and also distribution of film and how it's shown, and also how it's shown in educational institutions as well. It was interesting in the UK that you've got these really respected filmmakers, animation filmmakers like Elizabeth Hobbs, Emma Calder, Ruth Lingford, but some courses don't really show those films to the students, and I think a lot of them kind of go through that whole course thinking that if you're a director, you're a man, you're in Hollywood, you're working on mainstream industrial cinema, and then there's not this sort of alternative world. So yeah, I guess exposing students and people to the work that is already out there that isn't just as well.
Yeah, I wanted to add, actually, audience is very important, and I guess it's also connected with economics. If women are getting more paid, they can afford to go to cinema and to vote about films that they want to see. It's so easy. So yes, if women earn more, there are because there are this, that in Latvia very often when I do my female stuff, male friends and artists are saying, oh no, I'm not interested in this, female stuff. And I started to tell that, oh no, I'm not going to another boring male exhibition. Not interested in this particular male. Because it's interesting that it works like that, that male stuff is perceived like something general, but female is perceived like something very specific. And that's, I think, also must shift, that also again, that also men are starting to go to female events and watching female movies with the same interest as female are watching male movies. Yeah, that's it. So, do we have, but thank you, very interesting question. Another question, yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to maybe comment to give it a little bit different perspective from what I hear. I am from this country, from Latvia, and I think that we have to differentiate between the feminism in big countries and feminism in small countries. Because in small countries we are 1.8 million and our film industry is tiny, tiny. And if we start pressing on, female or male issues and forget about professionalism, I think this would be a disaster in my eyes. I think in smaller countries, every professional is of huge value in any profession, and we shouldn't forget about this. I think, and also you were touching in your discussion about how talking about the body, and somebody said that it's important that people are happy with how they look, or even when they are not perfect, or that they are the personalities that they are. And when we reach that stage in mass, we will also be able to forget, I think, about the femininity or masculinity so much, and talk more about personality, whoever we are.
Yeah, of course, I agree with what you say, and I think it's super important to reach that point where we don't have any preconceptions of how we should look, or of what place we should play in society. But for more than 2,000 years, we've been taught certain ways, and I think having these conversations is important, because what we're trying to do is unlearn all of this kind of oppression, because really I'm not talking just about women, I'm talking about men as well, I'm talking about people. We are born oppressed, we are born to live in certain ways that someone else decided for us. So I think navigating this and finding your own way and supporting each other is super important. And back to your first point, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't support an artist because he's a man. That is not equality. Feminism is about equality. It's about everybody having the same rights to produce art, to work, to their relationship. And I feel we're not in this level yet, as of now.
Yeah, I agree. It's I also would like to have this, I hope that I will live till that future, but I'm not sure. Not in Latvia. But yeah, about talking about, I think it's really, thank you for your comment, but I think it's not really, it is linked with professionalism in a way that it's funny that I have heard that there is a male director who is looking for DOP, and he's usually inviting male DOP. like because they are professionals. Like, and I mean, there is this sexism exists, and it's like really hard to talk about like this. That's because it's important that we have schools that are open, that we don't have stereotypes, that we are also bringing up this women DOP, and we get this female gaze, and we get teachers also that who are female teachers, because yeah, it's interesting that also for this camera guys, it's like, oh wow, we have like female teacher. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's still we are quite far away from this point where we are like perceived equally, and sometimes these problems that are seems like I just invite guy as a DOP. It's kind of, it's not a, in the case of this director, he doesn't see this problem, but if we look from the distance to society, we can see that it's kind of system. It's not just some kind of individual choice, and it's not dictated by professionalism. It's about system, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I also agree that professionals are I'm happy to work with everybody. We are not trying to bash on anyone. I actually don't. I always choose the work, not the person. To work. I mean, if I work with someone, I'm always thinking about their work, not who they are as a person, except if they are not nice. But about the other comment of yours about us being about being good, about feeling good about our bodies in the future, and maybe we won't need to talk about body issues. I guess that was the question. It's not just about the body being portrayed or critiqued harshly in this world, but it's also about, I don't think it's possible to be okay with one's body. I don't think confidence is something that's achievable full-time ever, because body is your physical being in this world, and being in this world is always very harsh. So I think talking about it is an ongoing process. It's not something you achieve and then you put it down and you have other issues to go about, but it's always gonna be an issue, the body of a person, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you. It's like on this optimistic note, the body will be problematic.
I think it's optimistic actually, because if you realize that you don't have to strive for this grandiose confidence, then you realize that there is nothing to run after, and it's actually a very confident feeling.
Yeah, I think in my opinion, it's also like human being will never be perfect, so we have to deal with our imperfections. So I think it's nice, and we will have some job for animators, hopefully. So I guess we should end now. And thank you for your attention. Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being part of this wonderful talk. And 2 Annas Industry Day events are organized thanks to the support of Latvian National Film Centre and Creative Europe Media Desk in Latvia. And now, in 10 minutes, I invite you to stay for Signis Baumanis short film retrospective. She is one of the rare Latvian directors, but actually she's now living in US, who is talking about body and body issues and about female sexuality. And this film retrospective will start at 5. Thank you.